Check this out. We live and direct. We in the building. Coconut Kingdom family. We got new music, new merch. WMI Records is on the shop. Constant Cash Records. We in the building. We gotta keep the fade fresh, clean. We gotta keep the French tips clean and fresh. But check this out. If you sign up right here, you can get 10% discount off of your purchases. First name, last name, email, phone number, and I'll be able to reach you guys. That's live on the shop, coconutkingdomfamily.com. But let me break this down. So, with relationships, with friendships, and with everything in society, things happen at different times, but almost in the same way. So, imagine if you're in relationships in the modern day and age with innovation, with everything. Sometimes people want to try to save your relationship if you want to try to work more, if you got to get your money right within harder times like revolutionary times or financial crashes and markets. So sometimes people feel like anytime there's harder times, you shouldn't be in relationships, or anytime that there is harder times, you gotta hustle more when there's a relationship, which can be both true and not true at the same time. So sometimes in relationships, you guys might be loyal, but then other times people might step in and not understand how long you guys been loyal for. Could be 8 years, could be 10 years, could be more. Sometimes it's girls and other girls that also cross interfere, that might be jealous, envious, or even just hanging around the wrong 5 individuals. So many women hang around people because they're strong as the girl next to them, because that takes less confidence to be with a girl versus to be with a guy, because same sex, feminine or masculine is easier to be with versus feminine and masculine. So there's a difference in associations between those on collaboration and the ease of collaboration when working. It's not always easy if you work with the same, and it's not always not as easy if you work with the same. But in general knowledge, working with guys and guys is more common ground, and girls working with girls is common ground. So it's harder to be in relationships when it's business or partnerships with common ground when it's opposite partners or opposite sex. So sometimes in day in life, you might be with your partner for years. It might be like a business, it might not be. But confidence gets in the way. Some people might not be as confident, other people might be more confident. Some people might understand different sides of the game, some people might not. Some people might have understood the game 30 years ago, but it's different than the game 30 years later, even though it's same life. So sometimes before social media, it was different than after social media. But nowadays and age with social media, everybody like to get into your drama. Everybody like to get into your business and start drama. Everybody has trauma associated with them from their families, which leak into people's business to start drama that's unnecessary. So sometimes you might be in partnerships, collaborations, or even working with people in different businesses or even in music. We're in the studio right now. So back in the days, there was segregation and separation. That would happen between different cultures, sometimes at different times, or just different families, just because lack of understanding, lack of the way people move in different cultures, lack of understanding of chronological order if it was only certain people in certain cultures. So if one family was mostly women but they still had a man or two men, versus if it's mostly men and they had a girl or two or more women, that is always different within family and chronological order, and who's oldest and who's taking care. This is all different forms of group economics. Sometimes people want to save your relationship in harder times by saying, okay, there's like a order. If there's an order or a restraining order, sometimes that could create separation, but sometimes that could cause actually bringing people together. But philosophy is very important, and ethics and morals and laurels, but understanding this at different points is not always easy, because sometimes it's word math, but then sometimes with word math it's hard to understand versus number math. Word math can sometimes still have chronological order with wordplay, but sometimes different cultures read books and words differently too. Japanese read it kind of from reverse and different way. English read it one way, left to right. So now if you're reading Japanese books versus English American books, that's already a whole different culture and association. If an American that was all women was to meet a Japanese man who reads books the opposite way, there's going to be a whole different traditional value, and they might love each other too, but it's just different understanding at different times. Sometimes people are first Americans, sometimes they aren't, and they're immigrants. Unity is unity. We don't need to create separation. But then that also creates different things within family order too, because I've been through certain things, although I'm an American citizen. But at certain times when you were dreadlock rosters, at certain time periods, they treated you, even if you were sometimes an American citizen, they treated you like you weren't, even if you were allowed to do certain things at different time frames. So imagine you were doing business in a telephone book your whole life, and then cell phones come out and there's no longer telephone books. You about to be lost in that translation, but it's not wrong or right. It's just that you was using telephone books and your store was ABC store. Now there's no more telephone books, and ABC store don't even matter if that's first in order, because it's not a telephone book now. Now it's an algorithm of where you want to go. So if you are used to using telephone books and now you use a cell phone and you're using just telephone numbers, you might not need to see the ABC store as number one if you're not, no longer using an old school telephone book versus a modern day phone, and times have changed. So there's a lot of different associations, but sometimes people try to save other people with restraining orders, because that's a RO. That's different interferences in relationships at different times. Sometimes it could be the person, both parties communicating. Sometimes it could be somebody acting as if they are the other party communicating with another party. Or it's both parties didn't even get to communicate and different parties are communicating for them, just because times are harder. Maybe they learn differently, maybe different. There's so many different things in this world where people run with the ball or make up their own kind of rules that is not actually professionalism. Once you move with professionalism, like, you gotta stay in between the lines on the court or the field or the basketball court. Like with this, there's regulation size basketballs, and then there's smaller ones, and then there's even smaller ones too. So once you start learning each different type of regulation and the way you can move in different societies and cultures, now you have a greater globalization and understanding. This doesn't mean that you're trying to create globalization where every culture is the same. It's just that you have a global understanding on how to interact with different cultures at different times, which even when you learn that, it's still not easy, because different business ethics, principles, and cultures move differently, even what they consider group economics and different types of economics. So sometimes you might have been just like me. I'm first in America, which is different. So I don't have as much resources as a lot of people because I'm still young. but then I also went through segregation and separation in different ways. But I'm still a citizen where they made sacrifices where I didn't need to do visas or green cards, although I'm still American and I have passports. But that doesn't mean that there's separation. It's just that there's different things to be aware of, but it's still unity in different cultures. But sometimes they might, if you're in love with people, they might try to test fate. They might try to see, okay, does this person really love you enough to break certain rules, although somebody else not knowingly might try to save your relationship, or they might try to interfere with the relationship. Sometimes if you're a dude hanging around all ballers or a different type of dude, in schooling and educational backgrounds in different sectors, there's different wording and jargon for each professionalism. So sometimes if you're hanging around salesmen, that's different than hanging around nurses. Sometimes if you're hanging around bakers, that's different than hanging around engineers that are building. Sometimes if you're hanging around a baker and an engineer and somebody who builds business, building business is different. Like this, CoconutKingdomFamily.com is different than building a bakery. It's different than knowing engineering, whether you're building the actual store physically or non-physically. But this also relates to different cultural backgrounds too, and understanding how things move in life and in different cultures, especially if you're in the US or in Hawaii or different islands. Sometimes you're in different islands, but they want to also say it's sovereign. So then it's almost like you're a state, but not state at the same time. But in the USA, they just, they call everything states. But sometimes you have to be respectful because some people don't want to live like it's a state. They want to live more like if it wasn't a state. But there's also confusion with that too if you start using water, electric, and all of this, because once that's provided, it's usually state funded. So if you drinking water, living in a house and all that, and electric, it's harder to act sovereign if you're not just living off the land. But that just means that there's different people, how they live, different cultures live differently. Sometimes people live in the mountains, sometimes people live in the city. Sometimes people live in high rises, penthouses. Sometimes people live in small houses that's easy to take care of and it doesn't cost a lot. Sometimes people live in apartments. Sometimes people live in condos. Sometimes people live in, there's like Airbnbs. There's different, all kind of ways. Sometimes it's work, trade too. And they just live in all different forms. This is also different cultural ways of living. And this is also how different cultures make money and also trade things and their perspective. Sometimes one sees one side of one way. Sometimes they miss the other side, or they also see the other side. But there's multiple perspectives and views always happening at the same time. So if you ever get into business or partnership or marriage or even just regular friendship, this happens different between all different cultures, whether you're black, white, yellow, purple, red, green, blue, different colors. People feel different ways about different things. Even each color versus yellow and black, it mentally and perspectively changes you in each location that you're interacting in. So usually they say dark blue is like business professional or black. So they make you wear black only or dark blue or white. It's a super neutral but professional colors that show you and tell people that that's what it is. But now I'm talking kind of low-key American education, college, university. If I take that to a different perspective or a different culture, those colors change now. It's not just white, dark blue, black, or even other colors. It might be yellow, it might be green, it might look more like 70s colors. It might be, and this all gives you different feelings depending on different culture, your background, and how you were raised. So Sometimes people also like to test loyalty and respect in different ways. But this is also different between feminine and masculine. Loyalty and respect is different between feminine, masculine, and different age groups and chronological order. So if you're somebody that's considered an OG, which is actually an older person, if you're an older person, that doesn't mean you have to be old. I'm talking online right now. But just because your number value is old, that doesn't mean your lifestyle is older. You could still be young at heart. You could still be younger than people who are actually younger. So a lot of people who are older are actually younger than younger people and their behavior ways. So sometimes different cultures make you behave different ways due to chronological order and the things that you've been through within the culture. This gives more nuance when speaking on globalization and how to interact and radically collaborate between friendships, businesses, partnerships, and or even marriages. But in today's modern day and age, even marriage is different because of the funding. So if you were looking at marriage from 30, 40, 50 years ago compared to marriage in a new society, 2025, that's completely different too. And depending on each culture too, they will marry different or they wouldn't. If you are a Rasta, if you are a white, if you had more finances than somebody who was black and you held them down, that's a deeper loyalty respect if they're a Rasta and their ethnicity allows or they were trained to believe that they could have multiple partners. So different cultures believe you can have multiple partners or not at different times. So if you are like a Rasta or grew up off of Haile Selassie versus an American citizen who grew up off of Catholic or Christianity, this is two different cultures. So if you come from more finances and you hold down somebody who comes from less, but that also means that they didn't know the understanding of loyalty in different ways. Sometimes they even teach it in different ways just because of the knowledge and understanding where the culture or the people come from. Sometimes people who are older as well, they do things called Mandela effects where they try to sleight of hand people who are younger. So they'll try to slight the rules differently, but they also might not know the rules differently as well. So they might do different things. But today in relationships, they might challenge you in different ways. But we don't want to do no Bonnie and Clyde and break laws and other things in different ways. But if you have a friendship and a partnership, you can always reach out, especially if other people are the ones creating drama or envy or jealousy. Because different cultures, different age gaps, different sexes, they create different things within the family at different times, depending on how they feel, depending on what age, depending on the mood they're even in too. So in today's day and age, what they do a lot within partnerships, friendships, and even business, sometimes restraining orders happen and other people do that to try to keep you together. But sometimes they don't know what time, day, and age it is in. So today's day and age, if you ever have restraining orders and it doesn't make sense and other people are cross interfering, sometimes that if the person is in your direction and is still your best friend and doesn't know that somebody else, like in sports, did an offensive foul or pass interference, this means fouling somebody even though that they shouldn't be. Even if that person is bigger than you and you're smaller than them. This is different in sports on how everything moves or in culture, friendships, and other things. But in relationships, sometimes they want to test your loyalty by seeing Okay, Bonnie and Clyde back then, they had to ride together. That's like some Jay-Z, Beyonce type stuff. But in new day and age, the rules are different than what it was back then. That means you're not riding like that. That doesn't mean that your loyalty and respect isn't the same, even if you're a business owner who usually works or is a business owner who is still learning to become a business owner. So if you're learning to become a business owner and you don't have an office, or if you do have an office, that's different than if you're a pedestrian and not a business owner. So also in today's day and age too, they like to create fear, or they like to do something called fear mongering as well. So if you're in a relationship, if you're at a younger age, if somebody is jealous, if there's guys and women and they're hanging around or they have different cultural views, sometimes even if two people love each other, just by them talking to other people, that would completely shift the ball and perspective on cultural views, on partnership, on marriage. This could just be your friends, your next door neighbors listening to you, even people that's houses if you're in an apartment and they're in a house and they're listening to you, which is wild too. So this also be happening. But in modern day, if you're committed to somebody and you are just talking to somebody, but other people like to cross interfere for no odd reason with ego, jealousy, envy. Sometimes this is your best friends. Sometimes this is people who you were friends with that start drama because they may have went through certain things like this. And this is why then you see that they cannot do certain things. Now they're able to control algorithms in different ways. They're able to control internet and media in different ways. This is all off of cell phones. This is all off of different things. This might be not even intentional. Or it might be intentional, but still lack of understanding on different parties. Because someone might understand while everybody else doesn't understand. So this is why I'm breaking it down. It's a little bit longer form content, but I'm breaking it down. So if you're in a relationship, if you're committed, even if you held loyalty and respect, sometimes I went through issues where my dad had to get sent back home. He was just making music in the studio. Sometimes people even say that other cultures may be more wild, but that's only because they don't understand certain rules. That doesn't make them a better person or a worse person. It's just the lack of understanding and knowledge, or different understanding and knowledge. So in today's day and age, they might want to test you. If loyalty and respect means go see the person in real life, sometimes, yes, that's what you should do. If you don't know where the person lives in real life and they didn't have a house, that means you gotta go to the person that, if they held you down and you had less money, you gotta go to them, because they don't know where your location is if you cannot find them. If somebody hacks your phone, if somebody changes your address, if somebody does anything else and they cannot find you, or if you switch from iPhone to Android and now iMessage is different, GSM, CDMA, and different phone carriers are different. This all happens within modern day relationships, and it will change the person's belief, perspective, and how they communicate. So back in the day, we used to have telephones. You had to stay at the wall and move that. It was hard to communicate, so you go into person and communicate. But communicating in person isn't always the best way to scale as well, or to communicate professionally to multiple people. So if you're not communicating with media or listening to the person in media and in person, you're gonna get a message that's slanted and not the same as if you actually talk to them in person and knew how to read their media the right way while speaking to them in person. Verification on both sides. So many times people have loyalty and respect, but they're just learning to make more money in the hardest times financially. So if you're learning to make more money in the hardest times financially, but now different cultures think you gotta have certain money, or if they think they taught you a American way, but that's not actually the American way to do things. Some people think you gotta buy a house first. You buy a house first, now you have mortgage first. That means things about to take longer for you and you gotta work harder. Yes, that's good that you have a house, but now if you in an apartment first and you don't have house money, you about to have some house money saved on the side to get you there. A lot of times if you live in an apartment and you never had house money, then you get to have your apartment and your house on the side. And this is different because people who come from different backgrounds, even within America, don't have understanding of how this is, because there's poverty level that's like 20,000 below, 25,000 below, still poverty, still broke. So if you came up on 20K just today and you never had money and now you see it and you balling, you still broke because you probably won't know how to continue to make that. This is different in America. People who live in houses, they live in houses and they have a luxury that people who live in apartments don't. People who live in apartments, they gotta keep hustling every single day. But it's also different financial brackets. And sometimes this is also different within relationships, partnerships, collaborations, and even in marriages too. But it's not. Sometimes if you think finances is what's the thing that's holding you, then that's sometimes even the wrong perspective as well. Because sometimes you might make a play that's not based off of finances that make you more money than if you weren't thinking about your finances, which is sometimes that's hard to think about. So sometimes if you sacrifice and you go to school, you make more later. But sometimes if you're just creative now or a baller earlier, you make more than if you ever went to school. Sometimes if you go abroad and you learn a different culture, now you're more, globalized and have a bigger understanding than if you only stay within your community. But sometimes if you only stay within your community, you might know people at a larger scale and more at a niche than if you even knew people on a global scale but not personally. This is all different. So if you were ever to meet somebody who is a business professional or an artist or a super producer, usually business professionals, artists, producers, or people who work in offices, they don't walk around in public, really. They only do that when it's time for them to do that. Whenever they're networking, whatever they're supporting different people or certain businesses. But you don't see Jeff Bezos walking around just in public, really. It's because he's usually doing things at scale on a bigger way that he's usually in a different place too. So when you do see him and you can talk with him, it's different than if you ever seen him in media, or if you saw Zuckerberg, or if you saw The Rock, versus if you see them in public, because there's different time frames, different times, and just the way they're behaving from what they're doing in real time is different than actually online versus who they are. But usually they're still the same person, but it's different businesses and different professionalisms all happening at different times, even if you see them talking online like this. So as I'm talking online like this, I have music going across the world. I have products being sold. I'm funding manufacturers across the world. I'm talking to thousands of people at the same time. But then if you knew me in real life and you were my next door neighbor, you would be like, yo, who is this dude even talking to? What is going on? How do I know that he's even talking to other people? Well, then you would have to go onto my online presence where I'm a public figure / researcher. This is JoshFordeMusic.com. This is Josh Forde on all social media platforms. This is Josh Forde on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all of that. So you can find me on places. But when you see me in person versus not, or just chilling in the house and just talking that talk, It's different businesses all happening at different times behind the scenes just because you cannot actually see it. So I might be, still funding my warehouse every single month, even if I'm still in a different city, but business is still happening. That's where all of this right here, Coconut Kingdom family. I might have warehouses all across the globe holding this because I still live in an apartment, but that doesn't mean I'm rich where I'm like financially where I'm at a house. So this is different levels. So you could still be a bigger business owner than people who are in houses, but people who live in houses could still come from bigger financial backgrounds, even if they're minority, American, or immigrant. Sometimes immigrants have more money than even Americans, but Americans might have more businesses and everything that's actually helping community versus people with more money who can stack it, but they're just sitting on a lot of money. But then they move their money in different ways. That also affects different relationships in different ways, because apartments are different than houses, Japanese are different than African American, Caucasian, European, Irish is different than Samoan, Hawaiian, Chinese is different than Taiwanese, different than somebody from Slovakia. It's all different cultures, all different times. People who live in island hot weather operate different than people who live in super cold weather. Sometimes people move the ball faster and slower just because of weather and understanding as well. But this is a long form content. So you might be in relationships, you might be in partnerships, working with models, you might be working with business people, but they might be trying to get their money right. Their phone might break, their internet might not be in service, but then other people might try to save your relationship or contact other people. But then the ball switches in a different way, not knowing, just because there's so many different cultural backgrounds, so many different perceived ways of laws and politics, even within 50 states. But that's different than even real life, because if I'm using a camera phone that's from a trillion-dollar business like Apple versus a different type of phone that's maybe $1 billion business, even these are gonna interact differently, which is they should all interact the same due to government standards and ways of communication and technology. But no, it's different. Even if you fly to the next state, it's different than if you were just in another state versus if you fly to a different country, or if you're in a state that's even considered more sovereign than even countries that's considered sovereign, which is the wildest thing. But sometimes even third world countries are even more knowledgeable than first world countries, which then the ball is starting to move differently. But then different empires and different globalizations, it's still peace, love, happiness, but it's all moving differently across the world at different times. So this is how I'm breaking it down. Loyalty and respect. Even if there's an older guy and somebody who's younger, that doesn't actually mean that they can't be together. They could still be together and they're like 50 and 40. Yeah, you could be together at 50 and 40 just because you're older and younger. But if it's a 50-year-old girl and a 40-year-old guy versus a 50-year-old guy and a 40-year-old girl, different dynamics, different feminine, masculine, even if it's from different cultural backgrounds. Even if there's deep love, loyalty, and respect, sometimes there might be different communicational skills. It might sound like it's argumentative. If you come from New York versus come from Japan, New York, they be wilding out. If you're in New Jersey pizza spot, they be like, yo, they be screaming super loud. Versus if you go to a noodle spot in Japan and it's cold, or it's not cold, or it could be even cold with less people and it's quiet, versus a pizza spot that's in New Jersey or even in a place but is influenced by New Jersey and it's loud. But that doesn't mean that the loyalty and respect is different. It just means that if you weren't used to walking into a New Jersey pizza place, shout out to Giannado's, and you were only going to a low-key sushi spot that's no noise, you might feel like, why is it so loud here, or why is it so quiet here? And both cultures take it differently. One might take the loudness as celebration, even though they're American. One might take the loudness as Japanese or Asian, as it's too loud and I'm trying to be more in tune and inner peace. Or they might learn to become American and now they celebrate louder at different times just to fit in, versus now they're trying to network and communicate with different ways, versus somebody who understands when to do it at all different times. You might hit a library, silence goes down. You might know that that is a pizza spot, but it's not that type. So it's like this volume versus this volume. Somebody in a house might be used to partying in their backyard 24/7. Next door neighbors live in an apartment right there. They cannot have noise volumes like that. That's how over the fence one way to the next way is different. So sometimes they might have tested loyalty and respect with certain orders and certain things back in the day. But if you're a business owner versus a citizen versus I be calling citizens as regular people who are just not business owners, who are just working 9 to 5. I be calling pedestrians people who are not trying to do all this and that in life, that they're just living a simple life. But I'm just trying to cross the street and chill. I ain't trying to do no look fly, go state to state, international and all that. This is all different people. So if you're speaking with somebody who's a public figure, social media person, versus somebody who never touched a cell phone, that maybe is older, or even somebody that's younger and still don't even use a phone, it's all different, especially with understanding. Usually the person who is the business owner and doing that understands all the other ways, but sometimes the other person who isn't also understands the other ways too. But there's so many different niche markets, nuances in different cultures, states, and even countries and around the world. So this is long form content, but it's sometimes you need it to have different variables and understanding. This is different math to understand variables and just different English to understand math and how it goes. You might not be good at math, but you might be better at English. You can still understand math as high as some people who are mathematicians, just because you're doing word math versus actually number mathematics. But sometimes you might know more number mathematics, which makes you even better at wordplay, just because you know you can switch it at different times. That's why they do number math and word math, where they're like, if somebody goes this fast at this time and crosses this over here, that's all different ways. But even these memes out here these days have different political values, different perspectives, different cultures. So if you're reading memes on social media and you're looking at different social media accounts, you might see different ways in different individuals. So if you go to my account, you see life in a whole different completely way, where I'm talking about business, culture, morals, ethics, music, cheap food, talking about community, friendships, all different kind of things in different ways, with me communicating verbally as well as me writing. So visual. Also, different cultures also communicate differently through audio, visual, and so if you're a writer versus if you're a listener and you like to hear things back versus if you like to just read it, that's also different understanding too. Sometimes people can do both. Sometimes one person can do only one and or the other. So then different comprehensional skills at different times happen for different people as well. But in relationships, two people might be young, but they might be around people who are actually older than them, and the game moves differently. They still might be loyal and respect since day one. It's just that they don't have finances the same as other people. But sometimes they don't want to even, although they want to pay respect to their family, they cannot move by the family's morals and the way that they were trained, although they still respect the family. Or they are trying to respect the family and also respect different family at different times, which then feels like they're moving the ball differently at different times. And if you're speaking to other people at different ages, older or younger, they understand the way this happens at different times for different ages with psychology and different cultures. So if somebody wanted to say they're still loyal to you, but they want to get their money right, they might do a restraining order in an odd way where they're trying to protect you with it, saying that they're still loyal and they're trying to get their money right and learn how to speak to the family but go a different route and a different way, but still speak with your family but not knowing how to in different ways. This happens, and sometimes it happens with protection orders, but it also might happen through restraining orders. But we don't want to do this because we're all people and we know how to communicate, especially if we sit down and speak with each other. Then we can have peace, love, and happiness. But also sometimes people take things, if you're more strict with them, they understand. Or sometimes if you're not strict with them, they understand it differently too. So sometimes if you're saying something at a low tone, they might listen to it like, oh yeah, I understand. Versus if you say it at a loud tone, they might be more like ready to get it together. Like, we gotta go. Versus, we could go or we could not go. This is all different nuances too within tone, level, and volume as well. It's sometimes different people come from different cultural backgrounds where different tones, nuances, and volumes all happen at different paces too. I also use this in music. If you go to the site, you can listen to the music. I use different tones, volumes, different vibratos, and holding lengths and sustains and not at different times too. This is all different within cultural music as well, on how they use different tempos and all of that. But some cultures feel like you gotta hustle more. Some cultures feel like you don't have to hustle more. Some cultures feel like you gotta do things at an older age. Some cultures think you gotta do things at a younger age. Some cultures only know how to see things from the age that they're at because of the age the culture is, versus the age of the culture but how fast they move as a culture and innovation happening. Sometimes they might be yelling America's number one, but it's number one at an older pace versus number one at a faster, innovative pace like Dubai. So they might be number one in like rules, standards, like ethics, but it might not be too, versus how fast they move in Dubai and how they can build stories that are this high and differences. So we might be sometimes thinking things are backwards within different cultures just because we've been around certain people. So if you're a guy hanging around all bachelors, you about to go party, you about to feel like you're just living a single life. But if you're a girl with all girls who are just single life, this is all single girls too. Single guys versus single girls, they experience things completely differently too. So if single girls are living like bachelors outside, it's different than single guys living like bachelors outside. and the way that it's perceived in different cultures too. So this is all different breakdowns and nuances, even within businesses, partnerships, and marriages and friendships. Sometimes people get married without actually being married on pen and paper, which is different than people interfering with your marriage and you having to write with pen and paper. Different cultures, different understanding of loyalty and respect. Sometimes in a day and age where you have cell phones and technology, that's different than places that don't have Wi-Fi, 5G, iPhones, trillion-dollar companies, and technology. That's why even though I'm more on a poverty side, which is less money, but I'm still with all the tech, I show it off for the people who sometimes even come from more money and are in the same culture, but they have less understanding due to the speed and tech and their money. Sometimes people are conservative because they have a lot of money they gotta protect. Sometimes people are less conservative and not, because they don't have no money to protect. So they're moving differently. They're like, yo, I gotta try to make money versus, yo, I gotta save this $1 trillion bank. If you on zero, you like, bro, I gotta try to go make $1 trillion in $1 trillion ways. If you on $1 trillion, you about to be like, I cannot lose no trillion in no trillion ways. I'm not about to do nothing with this. That's the differences too. So many times in relationships, you might have loyalty and respect in different orders. Sometimes people think cell phones are cheating. Sometimes they think it's networking. Sometimes they think it's just having fun online. Sometimes they think it's business. I like to think of it in all of the above. Plus, it's a modern day Rolodex. Before Rolodex was paper and everything would eat it, you lose half the business cards. But in Japan, they still use business cards. And if you got my business card, you're a real one too. That's how it is. But people don't be just having Rolodexes in the background. But now if you use social media, you can have a visual audio Rolodex of everybody in the city. Before, you have to carry 5,000 business cards, especially if you're being respectable. That's harder to do than if you're on social media with 5,000 people on LinkedIn, Instagram, or YouTube. Different cultures too have different confidence when doing this. But if you're still standing on loyalty and respect in different ways, sometimes people try to influence people different ways and their knowledge and understanding versus older and younger in different ways. If it's 5 single ladies that got divorced 5 times, that's different than 5 single men who's looking for their first love. 5 single men who's looking for their first love is gonna be probably older men or the oldest sibling within the family might have come from different backgrounds versus 5 single ladies who's just out here having fun. That if it's 5 men who've been divorced 5 times hanging out versus 5 women who've been divorced 5 times. 5 women who've been divorced 5 times, they about to say men is nothing. 5 men who was divorced 5 times, they about to say women is crazy. I don't know what is going on. But if you're hanging out around with these people within your family and they're not breaking it down on why they say certain things, sometimes people say, no, it's not your first one, it's your 5th one. Yeah, that's because they lost 5 times before they got to their real one. Sometimes it's their real one is off the bat because they won off the bat. That's the difference. So if you hanging around with girls that's telling you, girl, I had to do this, and this, and let me tell you about my intuition and feeling, I felt that. Yeah, if you was around 5 girls that was all on their 5th one, yeah, you felt that. Because that was the intuition and feeling. Plus, you synchronize with your bodies and you guys having periods the same time. Versus if you guys is 5 men all cheating on all your girls, you about to talk way different and crazy to the girl that's trying to look for her first man that was trying to build loyalty and respect. But if you're a girl trying to build loyalty and respect with a man that was trying to be your number one, bro, he ain't trying to wait around and none of that, especially if he's funding and balling and doing everything. So he don't want to wait on somebody who's younger that think that they got to get right. He want to put money in their pocket and get the game balling already. That's different for older guys versus older women, or younger guys and younger women. Whew, see, that's talking that talk, 50 minutes. I just did a 55-minute speech too, but this is completely different. This is loyalty, morals, respect, especially in the modern day when there's different ages, different cultures, and different places they were from around the globe. Because sometimes they want to respect you, but they don't understand the respect on how it's two sides of the coin. Sometimes it can be this and that, or it could be this, that, and both happening at the same time. Variables happen at different times for different individuals and different cultures, especially if they're in business too. My life be happening so fast that it looks like I'm at a slow pace when you see me chilling or just talking. But behind the scenes is designers, is business owners, is cards, is we flipping this. We got 10 artists we working with all simultaneously. This album is being done while that album is being done. This is different for certain people, even though you cannot see it. So in today's day and age, different cultures have phones and they don't. If you're lucky enough to have two phones, you know what a restraining order or a protection order does versus somebody who only has one phone, versus who has one phone who's an Android versus an iPhone, or versus two iPhones, or two Androids versus two iPhones, or one Android, one iPhone, and another Android. So two Androids, one iPhone, versus two iPhones, one Android. This all interacts differently in higher levels of business in modern day times. This is getting more to the end, but it's gonna be a full length one. So for anybody who can listen to this whole thing when I put it onto YouTube, you'll have a better breakdown again. So if you can, which is hard to do because each phone is different networks, but if you only have one phone, you're easier to lose communication if you were still standing on loyalty and respect. If you switch your phone, if you switch your number, if you lose your IDs and all of that, if you're not able to maintain, if you get hacked, if you can't get back in, if you're unconfident, having one phone is easier to get hacked than if you have two phones that's the same. If you have two Androids that's the same and you know how to link them, or if you have two iPhones that's the same and you know how to link them, they interact differently. So if you have two iPhones interacting, you now have iMessage interacting. You can chat with iPads only. You cannot chat with Androids because iMessage to Android and CDMA versus GSM versus an unlocked CDMA and a GSM is all different too. So if you a business owner who goes state to state international, these days you gotta communicate in different ways, especially if you only have one phone or if you don't. But if you only have one phone and you're standing on loyalty and respect, let me show you what happens. If somebody was to cross interfere, even though you have a loved one who's standing on loyalty and respect, they can use technologies like this. This is Jay-Z and Beyonce. Imagine Jay-Z was about to communicate with Beyonce, right? But there's a restraining order for some odd reason. Bro, they was together since Bonnie and Clyde 30 years ago. If the scandal happens to Jay-Z now, he's good because he can do whatever. He has unlimited money. If the scandal happens to Jay-Z when he's only in his 20s and he's still talking to Beyonce, that's way different than unlimited money versus not unlimited money versus unlimited money when you in the modern technological age versus unlimited money or not unlimited versus 30, 50 years ago is way different. So if you have social media and you about to interact with ASAP Rocky and Rihanna, or Beyonce and Jay-Z, or if you Justin Bieber and his girl, I be forgetting her name, but you know what it is. Maybe it's Haley or something, or something else. But maybe you're just starting to have a relationship too, but your family, your emotions, your foundation is all unstable. Somebody might say, okay, we want to protect them, or we want to do something else with them because of loyalty and respect. But if they only got one phone and they don't know the rules above, look what happens if Jay-Z about to do this. If Jay-Z about to like Beyonce's one with modern day technology and there's an order, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Look, so that like that I just sent, even if I wanted to send trust, it doesn't work. But it works if I have two phones. So if I have two phones, it can work for me, but it won't work for the other person on one phone only. So if I'm a guy who's loyal to a girl, but somehow cross interference happens, if I have two phones, I can reach out. But if she only have one phone, her media might not be working, just because of rules and not understanding and different cultures and how fast technology moves. So if I was Jay-Z trying to like Beyonce's post right now, even if I was trying to show love onto my own post and I wanted Beyonce to see that in the likes, it wouldn't let me, because the accounts are linked, but it's also linked in different ways. So if somebody put a protection order on you, or even a restraining order, but it wasn't even both parties, or somebody else went through that and then they did that knowingly or not knowingly, this is what will happen in modern day times if they're only using social media. I won't be able to like them, and I probably won't be able to follow them or find them. Sometimes they call it shadow banning. Sometimes they call it getting lost in translation. Sometimes other people, they say you was cheating or not being loyal. Or some people, they end up going more crazy too. And you see this in the community, because then people move on just due to not understanding, and they automatically think the other person had bad intent, but it's only technology. Jay-Z wouldn't be able to like Beyonce's photo in Instagram if he only had one phone. And if he only had one phone and it wasn't two, or two different ones, or two of the same phone. Two iPhones interact differently than two Androids. One iPhone, one Android interacts differently than two Androids or two iPhones. Or two iPhones and an Android, or two Androids and an iPhone all act differently with each other. So if I was standing on loyalty and respect, and I wanted to try to even look for my girl in modern day times, it would be super hard for me to look for her. But one thing that would be of evidence or proof is usually if there's two people within the facility now of the same in modern times, they use different ways. So then anytime they get close to each other, then they won't be able to like each other's photos. So if they're literally trying to find each other around the same block, or walk to each other but not go to the house, it's why you gotta meet in person and knock on each other's door, and not just have an ego. Because if you cannot like their post, but you don't know where they actually live, you're not gonna be able to find them. And then your psychology and people around you are gonna say, oh yeah, they was cheating, they was doing this, they was doing that. Meanwhile, you guys could be in the same area, could be a 1 to 2 mile radius, but now you cannot like each other's posts because It might be a younger girl. She don't have 2, 3 phones. It might be an older guy who's just doing business, but he does have 2 phones only. So now he's able to see, like, yeah, every time I was looking around and trying to find my girl, oh, now it says we restrict certain activity to protect our community. Let us know if you think this is a mistake. So yeah, always let them know and say it's a mistake. Because if you like something and you can't do it and this is popping up, that means sometimes that's also how they have protection orders or restraining orders in modern day times. So now everybody's thinking they're cheating on each other, but it's just the opposite sides of things who been through. So imagine now people been through 3 divorces. Yeah, they about to put this on you because they think from their perspective it takes 3 chances. No, not always. Could be the first chance. But now just because you felt that's how it was back in your day, they go through a modern day separation and segregation, which is on media. But telephones and communication, that's how I would have talked to my dad who got deported before. But roaming charges and everything, that's so expensive even if you don't get the person on the line. Now you could try to talk to them off of an iPhone. It won't go to them. Or their number might be changed. Or there might be a protection order. If there's a protection order, that's 2 people protecting each other in a wild time. But then if it's even a protection order, you cannot communicate still, which is kind of reverse still. But this is then other parties interfering. Even if you guys were solid trying to work on music, I had a whole bunch of people trying to work on music with me. And then all of a sudden, people cannot communicate with each other. So I was trying to talk to the queen, my real one, a lot of my real ones. And then it says, I cannot like their stuff. And this is sometimes too, it might be due to the technology getting older as well. So sometimes 2 older iPhones versus 2 newer iPhones, 2 newer Androids, or 3. This is why I'm learning too, to even have 2 or 3 devices if you can. That's even better in today's day and age. Because you might be loyalty and respect to your own wife. And now you cannot like their own pictures or your own partner. You might not even be wife and husband in the olden day way, just because you understand how money works in the new way. Anytime you cause separation, husband and wife, they lose more money and their kids. If you don't do that and you stand on real business but not cheat, you're not gonna lose money and kids. It's the new versus the old and how to look at things. But you can still look at things as the old and new too, and do it in different ways. But if you're doing real life communication on cell phones, on media, on the internet, trying to reach out the real way with Wi-Fi and all that, sometimes you cannot like your own Beyonce or Jay-Z's posts, or ASAP and Rihanna's posts, or Taylor and such and such posts, all because somebody else might have tried to get in between 2 public figures or 2 musicians or 2 creatives, or even just 2 people who wanted to learn together with communication. That's just different cultural backgrounds. But now in modern day, you gotta go knock on the person's house if they were holding you down, because they'll test your loyalty and respect. It doesn't have to be the person. Sometimes it could be their own family testing that on them, just because they understand their old habits. And I'm able to break that down and communicate it that, yeah, if you told me that your family was sometimes more wild already in the early days, then they might play sports off sides or street or and one, and you might be professional, and you might be like, yo, I'm playing professional right now. I'm not playing and one. I'm not playing NFL Blitz. But sometimes you might be like, I'm playing NFL Blitz, but I'm still professional. But then we can play it that way. But it's hard to communicate even if you have two iPhones, is what I'm learning, to my real one. Even if I got a new one and an old one, sometimes if you're in the same facility or around the same area, but if you don't knock on the door, you won't be able to contact them through cell phone, even if you want to. It's gonna show disconnection on both sides. And that's like a super big problem that you could even, this might be one of the biggest cases too, because this kind of stuff is it's affecting a lot of people's mental wellness, their trust, and even the community, on how the community interacts with each other. But this is long form. So even if you had somebody you love and you're trying to reach out to them, but you keep getting a message like this and it's popping up saying that it's restricted, they might be loyal to you too, still around the corner or around the block. They might want you to reach out because you was holding them down. They cannot find you. They don't know where you used to live, especially if you cannot like the posts or you cannot find them. Or you cannot, every time you call them, it does it on the cellular side too, not only on social. So you call them, it's disconnected, even though they still got the same number. This is what a protection order, what it seems like, or a restraining order, what it seems like. Even if this is not true at all to people that could have been together for 8 years. They could be 100 years old, 90 years old, and this could happen. But it's rules that they learned that was different. Versus kids that's younger, in their 30s and like 36. Like, yo, we still kind of young. Like, I be chilling. But this be happening to people who are younger, in their 20s too. Their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. Could be super professionals on both sides. Nothing ever happened to them. They're law-abiding citizens, Americans, and all that. So you might have loyalty, respect, be a law-abiding citizen, make more money than other people, and be trying to reach out to your partner, but you cannot. All because of just new modern day cross interferences, AI technology, cell phones, things being lost, and just people having limited understanding of how things work. So sometimes just because there's a restraining order or a protection order, that doesn't then mean that you have to, the other person gotta meet them. But if somebody ever took care of the other person and they don't know where the other person is, they gotta just chill where they're at until the other person realizes that this is what's going on today's time. And it could be from your, if you have multiple parents and they just didn't like that you was the first ones to like not get into all that, and you guys is just loyal. Now they about to say like, yo, that they're not for real. They're not serious. They're too young to be doing this and that. They don't have their money right. No, they might be more professional than the whole entire family, with the money better and at a younger age. Just because they was trying to get their life together and nothing ever was even wrong. But they cannot reach out just because other people were cross-interfering. But they was friends the whole time. So this is what's happening today. Shout out to the queen. Shout out to my real one. You know what it is. R-I-K-A. That's my real one from day one. Salute to a real one. But this will be happening even to friends. But that doesn't mean that the other person has to. So if the other person went through things in their own family, or they actually met somebody, or somebody was mistreating them but they wanted to meet somebody, this affects their confidence and their mental well-being. So now they're gonna be thinking like, oh, is this person cheating on me? Is this person not standing on loyalty or respect? Especially if the person is older. So if the person is like a Jay-Z and they've been in 40 clubs all around, if they take something from their 20s and send it to Beyonce in her 50s, she might be like, yo, was that you out there doing that just now too? But that's why communication and transparency is key. Because if I'm a young public figure, but I'm still older than a lot of people, but still younger, and I did a lot of life faster and retired at a young age, if I still look young to everybody, but I was in all the clubs, they might take pictures or photos and say I was with them and them. But that was only from 10 years ago, but I still look like I'm from 10 years ago. But I was still with the same person from 8 years ago. But if that picture was from 10 or 11 years ago, and I still had the same clothes, and if other people cross-interfere, send it, bring it back to the person, send it to the family, now act as if this and that is happening, yeah, they might start sending protection order or restraining, but it doesn't exist. It's not real, but it's just people not understanding, especially if somebody who was older before was with somebody younger and their intent didn't work out well. Now the younger person is going to always start thinking that older people aren't, having the intent that they should. But it's not always that. But sometimes their perspective and their beliefs can start to reflect that. Then I got to break it down for a whole, long form content that this will go viral in public for everybody. But this is modern day technology, different phones, different devices, different networks. And even if you guys was married for 100 years, this could still happen to you today, even if you were never married. So if that's my friend that I'm trying to reach out to, I'm not even married to, but what if I was about to just be like, yo, we've been together in the game long time. Now I cannot even reach out because they saying that you might have a protection order with somebody that was your former partner. Meanwhile, a former partner, that was your friend you just knew a couple of years ago. But they trying to get their Wi-Fi and their internet back on. Bro, iPhones is $2,000. The financial markets crashed. Even though I'm an American citizen, buying a brand new iPhone for $2,000 with a computer, $5,000 total, that's still expensive. But a lot of people, they have more than that all the time, but they don't understand that that's what even happens to them, even though they have computers and all that. So, you might be old, learning to use a computer is hard. You might be young, learning to use a computer is hard. You might be old, it might be easy. You might be young, it might be easy. You might be married or you might not be married, and still cross interference happen all the time. And you cannot like things anymore. And you cannot send calls, but it only tends to sometimes happen when they're around you too. So if you was loyal to the person and they were around you, but they're ashamed to go back because they don't know and they have lower confidence, every time they go around you or they try to call you, it could show on their phone that it's disconnected and not doing it and not going to the other person. Even though you already showed enough that you wanted to go close to their house and then call them. Just to be respectful, like, yo, I might be outside close by your house, but I want to pull up and I'm just a friend. You cannot do that sometimes now in modern day times and technology, just due to protection orders and restraining if one person only has one phone, and if one person doesn't have the understanding or the knowledge of modern day times that this happens. It could just be a regular friend, could be somebody you knew 20 years, but now with hacking, different technology, this happens. So keeping in touch is important today, even though there's more and more technology. So shout out to my real ones, long form content. I'm about to upload it. My bad for talking that talk too long, but this is information. This is new You know, you don't gotta be scared of technology. Use it, run it up, do it big time, because I'm on all platforms. But you gotta know both sides and how it works, because even people who are on the opposite side trying to protect you or not, there's the developers and the platforms behind that that's even more of a understanding than the people that even...
What are you talking about? Why don't you...
No, I'm ending the talk soon, but it sounds like you're not understanding.
What?
You're not understanding the talk I'm having because you're older. So I'm talking to my mom. That's a different audience. So a lot of times people will think you're also mumbling to yourself. But it's not mumbling to yourself. It's people that are older who just are louder from New York that have lack of understanding of technology.
People who are older, it's parents who are concerned that their son is going through some kind of mental
Well,
something.
I'm not. I'm online right now and I'm sharing products. So we're not going through any...
For an hour.
Yeah, because I'm breaking it down.
Here.
I reach hundreds of thousands of people online, and this is what I was saying in the very beginning. If there's nobody here and somebody doesn't know how to use cell phones, they think you're talking to yourself. If you're online and you have a social presence, then a lot of people can see this. Sometimes your moms don't understand the oldest sons. Sometimes your moms don't understand the youngest daughters. Sometimes your dads don't understand. Yeah, 2 hours long talking in your room is called long-form content. Long-form content in today's day and age performs better than short-form content. Everybody now is used to doing short-form content. I'm used to doing long-form content now, but other people who aren't, they'll try to cross-interfere, they'll try to get in the way, and they'll try to speak their perceptions louder. This is different principles. Usually it's the older generation. But now we're going through different segments and different generations who don't understand other people who speak. Especially when when I was young, they were doing the same thing. So when I was young, my mom was building forums and she was online. She was talking to everybody. And now, when I'm younger, she's not understanding the two.
I'm not talking for 3 hours.
Yeah, because some people answer questions and some people speak at higher levels and have high-level conversations. That's the big difference. But just because somebody else is yelling, that doesn't mean that their perception and their truth is louder than yours and is real. That's the big difference. Just because somebody can get louder than you doesn't mean that they're right and what their perception is true. Although you can have two beliefs at different times. So when your mom and parent is younger, yeah, they were online before you. Now it's a problem now that they're older. But they were the one who taught you to go to college, school, and be online. So it's ironic. It's like a catch-22 at the same time. They tell you, oh, I want you to pay the rent, pay the bills. Yeah, you start a business to pay the rent, pay the bills, and you talk about it. Now they're acting like, what is you doing? This is the big difference with today's day and age. Physical, non-physical, parents being older, kids being younger, ageism, sexism, not that, but unity, peace, love, happiness. You know what it is. I gotta go. This was only 1 hour. You guys be watching seasons and shows for like 5 hours drooling on pillows and you act like somebody cannot break down real life. This is the internet. This is joshfortheshow.com. Shout out to Google, Amazon. Shout out to all the businesses that been working with me. Shout out to Coconut Kingdom family, the Winners Club, and the Sire Collective. We got Nikes, we got Sires, we got new exclusive gear, and I'll be in the studio more soon. Let's go. Go get the new music. We ballin'.